And thank you for keeping it KTN Farmers TV. Today we are talking about dairy farming, and with me is Dr. Nelson Ojango, who is a vet by profession. Before we took a break, Doc, you're telling us what farmers need to know, especially when inseminating their cows. But again, they say information is power. A lot of these things we've talked about, where do farmers get all this information? Where is there a website where dairy farmers can visit and learn all these things?
Unfortunately, extension is not as available to farmers as it ought to be. 20, 30 years ago, when your dad was doing this, government officers came to the shamba, right?
Yes, they used to come.
They don't do that anymore, except in the instances where there's a program running or something like that. So farmers have got to go out there and find information. Sometimes they're lucky in their county. There's a program running, and for instance, 2-3 years ago there was a program called Cap Up that I was fortunate to be able to be a service provider, and we were training farmers in Nakuru for 2 or 3 years. At the end of that, that's it. But hopefully other projects come. So I think that's how farmers would tend to get most of the information.
But what really happened to extension services? Is it that our institution of higher learning no longer train extension officers, or what exactly happened?
I think the government no longer employs as many as they used to. That is what happened. Extension keep being produced. Egerton produces them, I'm sure other universities.
And how important is an extension officer?
The questions that farmers have, guidance. I know people who, they planted Napier grass for the very first time because an extension farmer came and said, try this. Yeah? I know somebody who says their grandfather did Asha because an extension farmer called something or the other actually said, let's try. And they tried, and today they have ushers in that boma because an extension farmer came.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, when you talk about dairy farming, can anyone practice dairy farming everywhere in this country, or there are regions that are particularly
there will
good
be
for
regions
dairy farming?
There are regions that are conducive to dairy farming. If you want to be successful at dairy farming, you need to have feed. As much feed homegrown as possible. So there are areas that are like that. But it also depends on other infrastructure being in place. So if you're able to sell your milk to a processing plant, then you're likely to go into that. But basically, they're milk sheds.
Okay.
Yeah. So in those milk sheds, people practice and go about dairy farming.
Okay. I know in some countries, dairy farmers are paid by the quality of their milk, not just the
quantity.
The quantity. It's the quality of the milk. Why are we not doing that, and why is it important to pay farmers per quality of the milk?
Why are we not doing that? That's not entirely true, because I know there has been trials. My friend Happy Cow in Nakuru, they pay their farmers on quality. The last time I checked, they pay their farmers on quality. Why? Because they are into cheese making, and quality components are important.
Okay.
I know Brown's cheese, I think, also pay on quality, but it's not everywhere. It would really help to pay on quality, not just quantity.
Okay. Also, when it comes to dairy farming, we've seen institutions also of higher learning. I know Harvest does a lot of dairy cows.
Yeah.
Schools also do a lot of dairy cows.
Yeah.
How important is this to also introduce the young people to these ventures when they are still young?
I think if young people take interest, if in a class of 100, two take interest, that is enough, really. Because there has been very little interest. So early exposure would be very, very nice. If I could, I would introduce this in high school, in the schools that have farms. Many schools have farms. So yeah, I think it's very, very important that young people get interested as early as possible. Unfortunately, people like yourself who grew up on farms do not want to go back.
No, I'm trying, but I'm now a long distance farmer.
There you are.
And that's where all the problems are. But also, another question is land a factor when it comes to dairy farming?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a factor. It's a real factor, because without land, how can you? It is possible to buy in feed and be a dairy farmer, but it will be better if the land is yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that is the case, are you not worried that some years to come, there are regions that will not be able to be a player when it comes to dairy farming?
That is true. I think there's been talk about land being looked at in view of that, and yeah, it is important. Otherwise, if you look at Thika, for instance, or Kiambu. Look at Kiambu. Many farms have gone to concrete.
Yeah, gone to
So, yeah.
real estate.
Yeah.
And there are also regions like Kisii where the subdivision of land has also
Absolutely.
led to very small pieces.
Yeah. The ideal thing would be for, instead of sons in a family dividing up the land, the ideal would be to farm it together.
Yeah.
And if there's 5 sons or 5 offspring, not sons necessarily, but 5 offsprings, the one that is interested should remain. The others should employ him to work the land.
Sure.
That would be ideal, but I don't know if it necessarily happens.
Okay. There are also laws and regulations that govern everything in this country, and there are laws and regulations that govern the dairy sector. Could land subdivision also be included in one of the laws that if this is a very good region for dairy, that you can only subdivide your land to a particular portion?
That would be brilliant. If that happened, and I think it should happen, that would be brilliant, because then in future, I mean, if we don't do that, we'll become net importers of agricultural produce, not just milk.
All right. Now let's move to the other dairy section that your heart is at the moment. That is dairy goat farming.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about dairy goat farming and the breed that are out there, and how is the sector as we speak?
I got into dairy goat farming quite by chance. I used to look after a few dairy goats on Delamere Estates, but my real interest came after I left, when a friend, actually 2 different people, challenged me to analyze the returns. One Shege Karagu and one Dominic Dollar. They challenged me and said 1 shilling into dairy goods and 1 shilling into dairy cattle. This is 10, 15 years back. And I did some analysis, and it looked like for the prices that dairy goat milk was fetching, it seemed like it would be more profitable to keep dairy goods. And so, as luck would have it, I ended up being a bit of a dairy goat farmer in 2 locations today.
So we talked about land being a factor when it comes to dairy cattle farming. If the land now is no longer as productive because of subdivision, can dairy goat farming still be a player in those small spaces? Yes.
I farm dairy goats on 2 locations. One is in Isinya, at a place that I'm leasing land, Latia Resource Center.
Okay.
1 acre, at some point, not today, but at some point, 1 acre irrigated was able to because it was irrigated and harvested intensely, I was able to keep up to 38 goats, including babies. So yes, land becomes easier to look at if you're doing dairy goats. You need less land.
Okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to the cost of the goats, how much is a good dairy goat?
There are 4 or 5 breeds. So the cost will depend on the breed.
Okay.
In this country, there is the Alpine, the Kenyan Alpine, there is the British Alpine, there is the Saanen, and there is the Toggenburg. You might also find the Anglo-Nubian. I know there's some breeders of Anglo-Nubian, and there's one called Obehasley that you don't see very much of, but the dominant 4 are the ones that are there. So because of being relatively scarce, the Saanen seems to be marginally more expensive than the others. But the prices will range from anything between 10 all the way to 25, 30. There are people who sell their bucks for up to 60,000 shillings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I want to start a dairy goat farm, what do I need to know? What is the procedure?
You need to find. You need to be able to feed them, number one. So before you bring them in, you need to have feed. Then you need to build for them.
So what does this structure need to look like?
The structure,
You know, for dairy farms, you just fence somewhere and that is it.
yeah, but dairy goats are a bit more finicky. They don't like drought. They don't like wet. So the ideal structure would be raised above the ground on slatted floor that allows urine and feces to go through. Yeah, basically that's it.
Okay.
have many places I've gone, farmers tend to build cubicles for goats. It's not necessary. It's not efficient.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can I raise dairy goats anywhere in this country?
Pretty much yes. Pretty much yes. I have exported dairy goats to Djibouti, a very hot country, and they thrived. So you can't talk about heat. Dairy goats can tolerate cold pretty well. I mean, cold climate pretty well. They just don't like being wet and it being drafty. So yes, pretty much anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talking about Djibouti, the export to Djibouti, why was the Djibouti importing dairy goats?
Djibouti did not have, at that point, they did not have any herd to talk about dairy goats. They had local goats and they had a program, an FAO-funded program that they wanted to upgrade, to introduce and upgrade their local goats. And I believe, this is 4 or 5 years later, I believe they've got a Djiboutian Alpine.
Okay. So when it comes to the exports of goats, why did they pick Kenya not, or where does Kenya stand when it comes to dairy goat farming in Africa?
They picked Kenya because they had approached the East African Farmers Federation, who have reach in the region. And after some preliminary survey, I believe they decided that Kenya had the most population, and so that's how we arrived at it.
Okay.
I was lucky to just be asked to do that.
Okay. Also, when it comes to breeding, does goat breeding also almost similar to cow breeding?
Yes. Yes. You choose what you want to have in the next offspring. Just pretty much the same. But AI is not as used as much as used in Kenya as AI in cattle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we also have catalogs for goats? Or?
If you're importing semen, yes, but locally, no. Cargrick is in the process of setting up a station for producing goat semen. I think it's in Domba.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the other breeds of dairy goats that are out there that we don't have them?
Really, not very much. There's the Nigerian dwarf, and then there is. But those are the five that I've mentioned. Those are the dominant ones.
Okay.
I can hardly think of any other really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does record keeping also play a big part in dairy goat
It
farming?
does. It should, and yeah, it should, because it helps you to select and improve.
All right.
To select and improve all the time.
Okay. We've talked about a vet all through this conversation.
Yeah.
How important is a vet to a farmer? Either a dairy farmer, goat farmer, any farmer that's keeping livestock?
The vet is very, very important because, one, he's a source of knowledge that the farmer might not necessarily have. Two, for clinical purposes, if an animal is sick, the vet should help make it better. Some animals are very, very valuable. You know, if you bought a cow for 250, 300,000, you don't want it to die. So yeah.
Okay. So how often should a vet visit my farm?
In the ideal situation, you should be able to afford the vet. So if you're a one cow farmer, you might not be able to do this. There's a push by some people I know to aggregate farmers so that they can access services. So back to your question, if you are say a 20 cow farm, the ideal would be to retain me to come through maybe once a month.
Okay.
Talk with your vet, agree on a fee that allows him to come through once every so often.
Okay.
That would be best.
Okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to feed, what is the favorite feed for goats, and how do you get this feed?
Goats love to browse. The other day I was training farmers exactly the same, and the best thing would be to find their specific plants, and I'll mention them: Caliandra, Lucina, Sesbania, Desmodium. You plant these specifically for goats. They're planted for cattle as well, but goats particularly like to feed on them. They will eat and everything else that cows eat, but yeah, they're picky that way.
Okay. What is their breeding cycle?
Every 5 months. No, pregnancy is for 5 months. Heat is every 18 to 21 days, just like the cow. So yeah, like I said, every 5 months you can get the gestation. Pregnancy is for 5 months, which means you could get a pregnancy and a half in a year.
Okay. So in a year can get
you get in 3 years you get 2 kids.
Okay. I also understand some goats are well known.
No, I got that wrong. Sorry. In 2 years you get 3 kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was saying, I also understand that there are some goats that are well known for giving birth to twins.
It's yes, there are breeds that should be like that, but you can also manipulate it.
How?
At the point of mating, it's called flashing. The exercise is called flashing. To flash a goat, basically to make sure it's in a very good plane of nutrition, feed her well, make sure she has adequate minerals, and then take her to the back.
Okay.
The chances are you'll get twins.
Okay.
Even triplets.
All right. Let's talk about pest and disease control.
Yes.
For both the dairy and dairy cows and dairy goats.
Yes.
What are some of the what are the most prominent pests and for both the goats and the cows?
So I was saying, I'd like to step back a little bit and address it as viral diseases being perhaps the biggest challenge because you don't have treatment necessarily. You have vaccinations. So foot and mouth in dairy is a big problem. Lumpy skin, and then there'll be issues of like mastitis, which is a bacterial disease.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also understand there's a disease called PPR.
It's yes, PPR is a French. PPR is in French.
Peste del pet something.
Yes, pest, the pest ruminants.
Yes.
It's yeah, it's been around, but I think in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot more of it than before.
Okay.
Yeah.
How bad is it when it comes to dairy good farming? Because I understand
You do not want it to visit you. I can tell you that. Fortunately, you can vaccinate, so you vaccinate.
How often do farmers need to vaccinate
Once a year.
against PPR?
Once a year.
Okay. All right.
There's also Rift Valley fever, by the way, that you also want to vaccinate against.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the future of, as we start winding up, what do you think is the future of both dairy farming in cows and dairy farming in goats?
The future for dairy cattle, farming dairy cattle, it's not for the faint-hearted. You've got to know what you're doing, and you've got to be able to sell your milk at a price that makes sense.
Okay.
Some farmers are able to sell their milk through the cooperative, and they're able to sell their milk all the time. Some farmers are able to sell their milk directly to the consumers. It depends on how much you're being paid. The cooperative route is guaranteed to take your milk, perhaps, but the prices are not as good as when you're selling directly.
Okay.
So it's not for the faint-hearted. You need to be able to. You need to be able to sell your milk. You need to produce efficiently and sell your milk at a price that makes sense.
Okay.
For the dairy goat, the market is not. The market is not.
The market's still young.
The market is still young.
Okay.
If you went to the supermarket, for instance, you will find one brand. That's it, Togs. Another brand is beginning to get in there, but it hasn't got traction.
Okay.
Otherwise, farmers are selling directly to consumers.
And how are the prices for the good
The
milk?
prices range anything between 100 to 250.
Okay.
I have sold my milk for 140 delivered to a processor, for instance.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Doc. I think that's all the time we had today. Thank you very much for sparing some time to be with us today and talk to us about dairy farming, both the cows and the goats. And I'm sure our viewers have learnt a lot about which venture can work for them. And as you've said, dairy farming is not for the faint-hearted. And I'm sure we now know why. For our viewers back at home, that is all we had for you today. Until next time, goodbye.